In the disorder of life, most people cling to the illusion that peace is something the world hands out to the polite, the patient, the well-behaved, and the endlessly understanding. And they live shocked every time reality proves otherwise, because they were taught that good intentions should shield them from consequences. Yet the world doesn't run on intentions. It runs on incentives, pressure, and timing. Which is why the calmest men in the storm are rarely the kindest men in the room. They're the most disciplined, the ones who learn to govern themselves before trying to negotiate with fate. We move differently, not because we're better than anyone, but because we've seen what reaction does to a life. We've watched one emotional outburst ruin a reputation, one proud response collapse a relationship, one impulsive decision wipe an account, one desperate need to be understood turn a strong man into a pleading man. And after you witness that enough times, you stop romanticizing emotion and you start treating it like weather. Real, powerful, sometimes useful, but never something you hand the steering wheel. Machiavelli didn't need modern headlines or social media to understand this, because he watched rulers fall in real time, not from lack of intelligence, but from the inability to govern their passions. And he saw the simplest truth that still controls the modern world, which is that the one who controls your emotional state doesn't need to chain you, because you will voluntarily walk into the cage as long as it gives you the relief of expression, the pleasure of outrage, or the comfort of being validated. That's why the modern world isn't built to inform you, it's built to trigger you, because triggers create predictability, and predictability creates control, and control creates profit. So most people think they're consuming information when they're actually being trained. They think they're staying aware when they're really being conditioned to flinch on command, to react before thinking, to pick sides before understanding, to speak before observing, to burn energy on noise that was designed to harvest it. And this is where our way begins, because the first shift is brutal and freeing at the same time. Tranquility is not granted, it is seized, not by brute force, not by loudness, but by discipline, by restraint, by the ruthless governance of the self, because the man who cannot command his own mind will eventually be ruled by the whims of others, whether those others are people, algorithms, markets, old wounds, or the hunger to prove something. If this hits you in the chest, not as motivation, but as recognition, hit the like button, because it helps these ideas reach more people who are tired of being emotionally steered. Purpose is the blade that cuts through uncertainty, and without it, a man becomes easy to distract, easy to bait, easy to delay, because he has no fixed direction, and therefore every temptation looks like a path. Every argument looks like a mission. Every shiny strategy looks like salvation. And you see this clearly in trading, in business, in training, in relationships. Because the man without purpose chases setups without a system, flips strategies when he feels pain, seeks a new mentor when he feels doubt, and calls that growth, when it's really just movement without direction. A man with purpose suffers differently, because suffering without aim crushes you, but struggling toward a vision forges you, and that is the dividing line between those who become sharper and those who become bitter, because the sharp man treats hardship like a whetstone, not a curse, and he doesn't ask life to be easier, he asks himself to become harder to move. Purpose isn't inherited, and it isn't whispered to you by the heavens. It is carved out through friction, through honest questioning, through solitude, through experience, through testing yourself until you learn what you actually serve, what you actually defend, and what you are actually willing to sacrifice. And these are not poetic questions, they are survival questions. Because without answers, you will keep surrendering your attention to whatever yells the loudest. Once purpose is discovered, it must be guarded like a fortress, because the enemies at the gate rarely arrive with swords. They arrive with soft voices, with comfort, with flattery, with entertainment, with endless, urgent opinions, with quick dopamine, with the lie that you can fix your life by reacting faster instead of thinking deeper. And if you abandon your post even for a week, your discipline begins to rot, your focus starts to fracture, and the old version of you returns like a thief who knows exactly where you keep the keys. This is where inner mastery becomes practical, Because inner mastery is not the absence of emotion, it is dominion over it. And dominion begins with the pause, the sacred gap between impulse and action. Because in that narrow space lies your throne, and most people don't lose because they lack intelligence. They lose because they have no gap. They have no pause. They have no internal buffer. They go straight from feeling to speaking, from fear to clicking, from pride to posting, from anger to attacking, and then they act surprised when the outcome punishes them. Train the pause the way you train anything else, because discipline is trained, not wished into existence, and you train it through small daily acts that teach your nervous system that you, not the emotion, decide the response, which means you set a task and finish it without bargaining. You keep a promise to yourself when comfort begs you to delay. You stay silent when your ego wants to correct someone. You walk away from the argument that offers no reward. You let the heat pass through you without turning it into a performance. And over time, you become a man who can feel deeply without leaking automatically. The modern world tries to convince you that expressing everything is authenticity, but that's not authenticity. That's exposure. Because the more you show, the easier you are to read. And the easier you are to read, the easier you are to steer. Which is why the most influential people you've ever met were rarely the loudest. They were the ones who spoke with timing, the ones who didn't rush to explain themselves, the ones who let silence do the work, the ones who didn't hand their emotional blueprint to strangers. And here's the thing most people miss. This isn't just philosophy, this is leverage. Because in negotiations, the one who breaks silence first usually gives up ground. In trading, the one who reacts first usually pays the spread and the slippage and the regret. In relationships, the one who over-explains usually hands away power and calls it being understood. And in life, the one who must be seen becomes addicted to approval, and approval is the cheapest chain in existence. Some of us are scattered across different cities, different countries, different time zones, and yet the same pattern shows up again and again. Disciplined people who would never call themselves special, but quietly live by the same code. People building online businesses, people training their bodies, people studying Stoicism and philosophy, people learning to trade Forex, crypto, or long-term investing. And even though they're far apart, they recognize each other instantly because the language is the same. Less talk, more structure, less emotion, more execution, less performance, more presence. And when those people find each other, even in small circles, the support is different. Not hype, not noise, but accountability, strategy, and the calm reminder to stay on the path when distraction tries to pull you sideways. If you see yourself moving like this, comment, "I'm Hunter," so the right people can recognize each other in the noise. Now understand this. Offense is not a wound, it's a test. And the modern man collects offense like trophies, as if being provoked proves he's alive. But to be offended is to be controlled, because it means someone else can reach into your mind and move your hand. And the man who can be moved on command is not powerful, he is programmable. When someone insults you, the weak man reacts because his pride is fragile and his identity depends on external agreement. But the disciplined man studies the insult like information, because sometimes it's envy, sometimes it's ignorance, sometimes it's a probe to see if you're reactive, and if it stings, he doesn't scream about it. He asks, what vulnerability did that touch? What unfinished wound did that expose? What attachment did that reveal? Because that is reconnaissance. And if you can turn insult into data, you can turn enemies into unwilling teachers. Forgiveness, when done right, is not softness, it's superiority, because it means you refuse entanglement, you refuse to trade energy for petty battles, you refuse to be dragged into duels that only shrink your focus, and you choose the highest move, which is to keep building while others keep talking, to keep training while others keep criticizing, to keep executing while others keep reacting, because the most violent revenge is quiet growth. Fear and shame are the most profitable chains on earth, because fear makes you hesitate and shame makes you hide. And a man who hesitates and hides can be controlled forever. But fear is often just uncertainty wearing a mask, and shame is often just someone else's opinion that you accepted too quickly. So the disciplined mind does not run from these emotions. It interrogates them. It breaks them into parts. It demands clarity. It asks, what exactly am I afraid of? What exactly am I ashamed of? Who benefits if I carry this feeling? And once you ask those questions honestly, most fear collapses into something manageable, and most shame collapses into something optional. The Stoics practiced anticipating difficulty, not to become paranoid, but to become prepared. And the strategic mind does the same, because being surprised is expensive. It's expensive in money, in relationships, in decisions, in posture. And when you practice readiness, you stop living like a civilian waiting for life to happen, and you start living like a tactician who expects resistance and therefore doesn't panic when it arrives. This is also the difference between those who survive markets and those who donate to them. Because markets punish emotional urgency, they punish revenge, they punish the need to be right, they punish the desire to get it back, and they reward patience, structure, risk control, and the ability to do nothing when nothing is there. Because discipline is not only the ability to act, it is the ability to wait. And waiting is a skill most people never develop because they confuse stillness with weakness. So you build yourself into someone who doesn't need constant stimulation, someone who can sit in silence without reaching for a screen, someone who can feel uncertainty without forcing a trade, someone who can be misunderstood without begging for clarity, someone who can be challenged without becoming emotional. And as you become that man, the world gets louder around you, not because it changed, but because you stop matching it. And your calm becomes a mirror that exposes everyone else's chaos. This is the edge, not coldness, not cruelty, not arrogance, but sovereignty, the kind of inner rule that makes you hard to bait and easy to trust, because your actions stop being mood-based and start being mission-based, and mission-based men become rare in a world addicted to reaction. Subscribe for more Stoic content like this, because this path isn't a one-time insight, it's a repeated training of the mind until your default response becomes composure. And if you take nothing else from this, take this. Emotion is not your enemy, but undisciplined emotion is a liability. And a liability in a world this engineered becomes a leash. So the next time you feel the surge, the heat, the urge to respond, the pull to prove, pause and ask the only question that matters: who benefits if I react? And when the answer isn't you, you stay still. You keep your posture, you protect your focus, and you move only when your strategy says it's time. That is how the composed become untouchable, not because life stops testing them, but because life can't steer them anymore.